Welcome. Settle in close to the fire. Tonight, I have a story of love, found in the harshest winter, of two souls who healed each other when the world tried to tear them apart. 1888, Texas Panhandle. The blizzard came without warning, howling across the open range like a living thing bent on destruction. Margaret Monroe pressed her hand against the frozen window of the small medical station, watching the snow bury the world in white. She had seen death before, on battlefields where men screamed and bled. But this storm, this was different. This was nature's fury, and there was no escaping it. The door burst open, bringing a blast of Arctic wind and a man covered in snow. Margaret spun around, instinctively reaching for the rifle she kept near the medicine cabinet. But the man raised his hands slowly, showing he meant no harm. As the snow fell from his shoulders, she saw him clearly. Cheyenne, from the beadwork on his buckskin shirt and the medicine pouch at his belt. Tall and lean with strong features and intelligent dark eyes that assessed her just as carefully as she studied him. "Storm is worse than anything I have seen," he said in perfect English, his voice deep and measured. "I need shelter. I can pay." He held up a small leather pouch. "And I am a healer. I can help with your wounded." Margaret looked past him, at the three soldiers lying on cots in the small station. One had been shot in a skirmish with raiders. Two others had frozen limbs from trying to patrol in this ungodly weather. She needed help, desperately. But a Cheyenne scout in a Union medical station? The soldiers would not like it. The army would not like it. The door slammed shut behind him as another gust of wind shook the building. Margaret made her decision. "Can you set bones?" she asked. "Yes." "Can you treat frostbite?" "Better than most army doctors." She nodded toward the back corner. "There is space by the stove. You can stay until the storm passes." He moved with quiet grace, setting down his pack and removing his heavy buffalo fur coat. Underneath, his buckskin shirt was beautifully crafted, the beadwork telling stories she could not read. He was younger than she had first thought, perhaps early 30s like herself, with long black hair partially braided with leather cord. "I am Joshua Ashford," he said, kneeling by the first wounded soldier. "My mother was Cheyenne. My father was a trapper from Missouri." "Margaret Monroe," she replied, bringing him clean bandages. "I was a battlefield nurse during the war. Now I run this station." Joshua examined the soldier's gunshot wound with careful hands. "You cleaned it well. No infection yet. But he needs rest and warmth." He looked up at her, and something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps. Two healers who understood the weight of holding lives in their hands. "The storm will last 3 days at least," Joshua said, moving to check the soldiers with frostbite. "Maybe longer. Do you have enough supplies?" Margaret did a quick mental inventory. "Barely. We were supposed to get a supply wagon yesterday, but..." She gestured at the window where nothing was visible, except white. "Then we can serve everything." Joshua's hands moved over the second soldier's blackened fingers with surprising gentleness. "This one will lose 2 fingers. The other man, maybe his toes. I can do the amputations if you have whiskey and a sharp knife." They worked through the night, side by side. Joshua's knowledge of healing herbs and traditional medicine complemented her surgical training. When she struggled to keep a soldier still during the amputation, Joshua spoke to the man in a low, calm voice, somehow easing his panic. When Joshua needed a steady hand to hold the lamp, Margaret did not flinch at the blood. By dawn, all 3 soldiers were stable, sleeping peacefully with the help of Joshua's pain remedies. Margaret and Joshua stood by the stove, drinking bitter coffee and listening to the storm rage outside. "You are good at this," Joshua said, cupping his hands around the tin mug for warmth. "Better than the army doctors I have seen. I learned from necessity. During the war, we did not have enough doctors. The nurses had to do everything." Margaret wrapped her shawl tighter. Even with the fire, the cold seeped through every crack in the walls. "You are good too. Your people's medicine. It works. My mother taught me before she died. She said healing was a sacred gift." His expression darkened. The army doctors did not agree. They said traditional medicine was savage superstition. Margaret heard the bitterness in his voice. "I have seen enough death to know that healing comes in many forms. If it saves lives, I do not care where it came from." Joshua looked at her with new respect. "Most white people would not say that." "I am not most white people." Margaret met his gaze steadily. "I care about keeping people alive, not about their prejudices." The wind howled louder, and something heavy slammed against the side of the building. Margaret jumped, and Joshua moved instinctively closer, his hand going to the knife at his belt. They both listened, hearts pounding, but heard nothing except the storm. "Probably a branch," Joshua said, but he did not move away. Margaret realized she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, could smell sage and leather and something else, something uniquely him. She stepped back quickly, flustered. "I should check the supplies." "Margaret." His voice stopped her. When she turned back, his dark eyes held hers. "Thank you for letting me stay. Many would not have." "We are all just trying to survive," she said quietly. "Out here, that matters more than anything else." The storm raged for 3 days, just as Joshua had predicted. Margaret and Joshua fell into a rhythm, working together to care for the soldiers, rationing their dwindling supplies, keeping the fire burning. They talked during the long nights, sharing stories of their pasts. Margaret learned that Joshua had worked as a scout for the army, guiding troops through Cheyenne territory, caught between his mother's people and his father's world. He had been rejected by both sides, trusted by neither, valued only for his skills. The loneliness in his voice when he spoke of it made her chest ache. She told him about the war, about holding dying boys who cried for their mothers, about the helplessness of watching men bleed out because she did not have enough bandages or medicine. She told him about coming to Texas to escape those memories, only to find that healing was her only skill, the only thing that gave her life purpose. "You carry their deaths like stones," Joshua said one night as they sat by the fire, the soldiers asleep. "I can see it in your eyes." Margaret looked at him, startled that he understood. "Every life I could not save, yes." "How did you know?" "Because I carry the same stones." He stared into the flames. "Every warrior I guided soldiers to, every village I led troops near. I told myself I was preventing war, that my scouting kept both sides from worse bloodshed. But I still see their faces." Without thinking, Margaret reached out and touched his hand. Joshua looked down at her fingers on his, then up at her face. The firelight cast shadows across his strong features, making him look both fierce and vulnerable. "We cannot carry them forever," Margaret whispered. "The weight will crush us." "Then we carry them together," Joshua said, turning his hand to lace his fingers through hers. Maybe that makes the burden lighter. The touch sent electricity through Margaret's entire body. She should pull away. He was Cheyenne. She was white. The world would not accept them together. But his hand was warm and strong, and she had been cold and alone for so long. "Joshua," she started, but he shook his head. "You do not have to say anything. I know this is impossible. I know what I am, what you are, what the world will say." He started to pull his hand back, but Margaret held on. "I was going to say," she continued, her heart hammering, "that impossible is a word for people who give up easily, and I have never been good at giving up." Joshua's eyes widened, hope and disbelief warring in his expression. "Margaret, if we do this, if we let this happen, there will be consequences. People will judge you. They will say terrible things. Let them." Margaret moved closer, drawn by something she could not name. "I have spent 3 years trying to forget how to feel anything except duty and exhaustion. But with you, these past 3 days, I feel alive again. And that terrifies me more than any judgment." "You terrify me too," Joshua admitted, his free hand coming up to cup her face. His thumb traced her cheekbone with such tenderness that tears pricked her eyes. "I have been alone for so long, I forgot what it felt like to want something for myself. To want someone." "Then take what you want," Margaret whispered. Joshua kissed her. It was gentle at first, questioning, as if he expected her to push him away. When she did not, when instead she pressed closer and slid her hands into his long hair, the kiss deepened. His arms came around her, pulling her against him, and Margaret felt safe for the first time in years. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Joshua pressed his forehead to hers. "This changes everything," he said. "I know," Margaret smiled against his lips. "I am counting on it." On the 4th day, the storm began to ease. The soldiers were recovering well, and supplies had been stretched to last. Margaret stood at the window, watching the sky lighten from gray to pale blue. Joshua came up behind her, not touching but close enough that she could feel his presence. "When the storm clears completely, I will need to leave," he said quietly. "I have a contract with the fort. They will send someone looking for me." Margaret's chest tightened. "How long?" "A week, maybe 2. There are rumors of Comanche raiders in the area. They want me to track them. And after? After, I come back. If you want me to." Margaret turned to face him. "I want you to. But Joshua, we need to talk about what this means. Us. I mean, if people find out, they will find out." Joshua took her hands. "And yes, it will be difficult. Some will refuse to see you as a patient. The army might reassign you. Your family, if you have any, they might disown you." "I have no family left." Margaret squeezed his hands. "And I do not care about the rest. But you, your people, will they accept me?" Joshua's expression grew sad. "I have no people, Margaret. The Cheyenne see me as half white, a traitor who scouts for the army. The whites see me as savage. We would be building something new, you and I. Our own family, our own home. But it would be just us against the world." "Then we better be strong together," Margaret said firmly. "Because I am not losing you. Not to distance, not to prejudice, not to anything. He kissed her again, deeper this time, with a desperation that spoke of imminent separation. When he pulled back, his eyes were fierce. "I will come back. I swear it on my mother's grave and my father's memory. I will come back to you." "You better," Margaret said, trying to sound stern but failing as emotion choked her voice. "Because I am not good at sitting around waiting. I will hunt you down myself if I have to." Joshua laughed, the sound rich and warm. "I believe you would." The next morning, with the storm finally cleared and the sky a brilliant, painful blue, Joshua prepared to leave. The soldiers were stable enough to be moved to the fort when a wagon could get through. Margaret helped Joshua pack his supplies, her hands shaking slightly as she tucked packets of herbs into his bag. "Take care of yourself," she said, her voice steady despite the tears threatening. "And come back to me in one piece. Always." Joshua pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. 2 weeks, Margaret. Just 2 weeks. And then I am done scouting. I will tell the fort I am retiring. We can figure out what comes next together. Margaret nodded against his chest, breathing in his scent, memorizing the feel of his arms around her. When he finally released her and stepped back, the cold rushed in where his warmth had been. "I love you," Joshua said, the words simple but weighted with everything they meant. "I know it is too soon. I know we barely know each other. But I love you, Margaret Monroe. And I am coming back." "I love you too," Margaret whispered, the tears finally falling. "Now go, before I change my mind and chain you to the stove." Joshua laughed through his own tears, then kissed her one last time. When he pulled away and mounted his horse, Margaret stood on the porch and watched him ride into the white landscape until he was just a dark speck against the snow. And then, nothing at all. 3 days later, the supply wagon finally arrived with fresh provisions and orders to transport the wounded soldiers back to the fort. Margaret found herself alone in the medical station, the silence oppressive after the chaos of the storm and Joshua's presence. She threw herself into work, organizing supplies, treating minor ailments from nearby ranchers. Anything to keep her hands busy and her mind from counting the days until Joshua returned. 8 days after Joshua left, a different visitor arrived. Margaret heard the horses before she saw them, multiple riders approaching fast. She went to the door cautiously, her hand on the rifle. 6 men rode up, all wearing remnants of Union Army uniforms that had seen better days. The leader, a tall man with cruel eyes and a preacher's smile, dismounted and approached the porch. "Good afternoon, miss," he said, his voice smooth as oil. "Might we trouble you for some water and medical supplies? We have been tracking raiders, and the going has been rough." Something about him set Margaret's nerves on edge. These men did not move like soldiers. They moved like predators. "I can give you water," she said carefully, "but I am low on medical supplies until the next delivery." The leader's smile did not reach his eyes. "That is unfortunate. You see, we really need those supplies. And I am afraid I am not in the habit of taking no for an answer." He took a step forward, and Margaret raised the rifle. "That is close enough." The man stopped, but did not look concerned. "Now, that is no way to treat guests, Miss Monroe." Margaret's blood ran cold. He knew her name. "Who are you?" "Luther Carlyle, at your service." He made a mocking bow. though I suppose my reputation precedes me. Former captain in the Union Army, though I found military discipline rather limiting. These days, I prefer more entrepreneurial pursuits. You are a deserter, Margaret said flatly. And a raider. Such harsh words. Luther's smile turned hard. I prefer to think of myself as a man taking what the world owes him. Speaking of which, I believe you recently harbored a certain Cheyenne scout. Joshua Ashford, I believe his name was. Margaret's heart stuttered, but she kept her face neutral. Many people come through here. Do not play games with me. Luther's voice turned sharp. Joshua and I have history. He cost me a very lucrative opportunity when he led troops to my last camp. I lost men, supplies, and my reputation with certain business partners. So I have been watching him, waiting for the right moment to return the favor. And imagine my delight when I learned he had fallen in love with a pretty little nurse, all alone in the middle of nowhere. Fear iced through Margaret's veins, but she forced herself to stay calm. Joshua will kill you if you touch me. Oh, I am counting on him trying, Luther gestured, and his men fanned out, surrounding the small station. You see, I am going to take you with me, and when Joshua comes rushing to rescue you, as I know he will, I will be waiting. 2 birds, 1 very satisfying stone. Margaret fired, aiming for Luther's chest, but she was shaking, and the bullet went wide, only grazing his shoulder. Before she could reload, 2 of his men were on the porch, wrenching the rifle from her hands. Spirited, Luther said, touching his bleeding shoulder with mild annoyance. I can see why Joshua likes you. Tie her up and bring her. We have a long ride ahead. They bound Margaret's wrists and threw her onto a horse. As they rode away from the station, Margaret looked back at the small building that had become her home, had become the place where she found love. She thought of Joshua, riding back to find her gone, and prayed he would be smart enough not to walk into Luther's trap. But she knew he would come anyway, because he loved her. And that was exactly what Luther was counting on. The raiders took her to an abandoned ranch 2 days' ride from the medical station. The buildings were half collapsed, the barn barely standing, but it provided shelter from the bitter cold that had returned with vengeance after the brief clearing. Luther kept her locked in the barn with her hands tied, giving her only enough food and water to keep her alive. Joshua will be back by now, Luther said on the 3rd day, leaning against the barn door. He will find the station empty and follow our tracks. Should be here any day now. I do hope you have been practicing your pleading. I want him properly distracted when we kill him. You will not win, Margaret said through cracked lips. Joshua is twice the tracker you will ever be. He will see your trap. Of course he will. That is what makes it fun. Luther's smile was chilling. He will know it is a trap. He will come anyway, because he loves you. And love makes men very, very stupid. Margaret closed her eyes, fighting despair. Luther was right. Joshua would come. And she had no way to warn him, no way to help him. She could only wait and pray that somehow they would both survive this. On the 5th day, just before dawn, Margaret heard it. A sound so quiet, she almost missed it. A bird call, but wrong for the season. Her heart leaped. Joshua. He was here. She started coughing loudly, covering any noise he might make. Luther's men, sleeping near the house, stirred but did not wake. Margaret kept coughing, making as much noise as she could. Then Joshua was there, materializing out of the pre-dawn darkness like a ghost. He cut her bonds with one swift motion, his knife barely whispering against the rope. His eyes were fierce and tender at once as he looked her over, checking for injuries. "Can you ride?" he whispered. "Yes." Margaret's voice was hoarse from disuse and cold. "Joshua, it is a trap. He wants you to come." "I know. I walked right into it." Joshua smiled grimly. "But I am not planning on staying. Come on." He led her to the back of the barn, where he had already prepared 2 horses. They mounted quickly, silently. But as they cleared the barn, Luther stepped out of the house, fully dressed and armed. "I knew you would try something clever," Luther called out. "You always were too smart for your own good, Joshua, but not smart enough." Men emerged from the shadows, surrounding them. 6 in total, all armed. Joshua pulled Margaret behind him, his hand going to his knife. "Let her go, Luther," Joshua said, his voice deadly calm. "This is between you and me." "But where is the fun in that?" Luther raised his pistol, aiming at Margaret. "Drop your weapons, or I shoot her right now." Joshua hesitated for only a moment, then dropped his knife and rifle. Margaret wanted to scream at him, to tell him not to give up, but fear had frozen her throat. "Good boy," Luther sneered. "Now, I have been thinking about how to make this hurt the most. I could shoot you both, quick and clean. But that seems wasteful. Instead, I think I will let you watch her freeze to death. Nice and slow. Then, when you are properly broken, I will kill you too." "You are a coward," Joshua spat. "Always were. That is why the army kicked you out. Not because you deserted, but because you sent your own men to die while you hid." Luther's face flushed with rage. "Shut your mouth, savage!" "Make me." Joshua smiled coldly. "Or are you too afraid to fight me without your men to protect you?" Luther's pride would not let the challenge stand. "Fine. You want to die like a warrior, I will give you that honor. We fight, just you and me. No weapons, no help. If you win, you and the girl go free. If I win, well, you do not have to worry about what happens next." Margaret grabbed Joshua's arm. "Do not do this. He is baiting you." "I know." Joshua looked at her, his expression softening. "But it is our only chance. Trust me." Before Margaret could protest further, Joshua stepped away from the horses and faced Luther. The 2 men circled each other in the snow, breath steaming in the freezing air. Luther was bigger, heavier, but Joshua moved with the grace of a predator. Luther attacked first, charging like a bull. Joshua sidestepped smoothly, landing a solid punch to Luther's kidney. Luther grunted and spun, catching Joshua across the jaw. They grappled, trading blows, both men fighting with desperate fury. Margaret watched in horror as the fight raged. Blood stained the snow. Both men were breathing hard, showing signs of exhaustion. Then Luther landed a lucky blow, his fist connecting with Joshua's ribs. Joshua went down. "Joshua!" Margaret screamed, trying to run to him, but one of Luther's men grabbed her. Luther stood over Joshua, grinning. "Not so superior now, are you?" He reached into his boot and pulled out a hidden knife. "I lied about no weapons. Sorry." He raised the knife to strike. Joshua rolled at the last second, the blade missing his throat by inches. In one smooth motion, Joshua grabbed a handful of snow and hurled it into Luther's face, blinding him. Then, Joshua was on his feet, his hand finding Luther's wrist and twisting until the knife fell. They grappled again, and this time Joshua got behind Luther, his arm around the bigger man's throat in a chokehold. Luther struggled, his face turning red, then purple. His men started forward, but Joshua's voice stopped them.
Move and I break his neck right now!
They froze. Luther's struggles weakened, his eyes rolling back. Joshua held on until Luther went limp, unconscious, then let him drop to the ground. "Your boss lives if you let us go," Joshua said to the remaining men, his voice hard. "You can take him and run, or you can die here trying to stop us. Your choice." The men looked at each other. Whatever loyalty they had to Luther, it was not worth dying for. One by one, they backed away, hands raised. Joshua grabbed Margaret's hand, and they mounted the horses, riding hard into the dawn. They did not stop until they were miles away, the sun climbing higher and warming the frozen landscape. Finally, Joshua pulled his horse to a halt near a cluster of rocks that provided shelter from the wind. Margaret dismounted on shaking legs, and Joshua was there immediately, his arms coming around her. "I thought I lost you," he said roughly, his face buried in her hair. "When I found the station empty, when I saw the blood on the porch, I thought." "I am here," Margaret said, holding him tight. "I am here, and we are both alive." Joshua pulled back, his hands framing her face as he examined every bruise, every cut. "Did they hurt you?" "Nothing I cannot heal from." Margaret touched the swelling on his jaw where Luther had landed that solid punch. "You are the one who just fought for both our lives. I would fight 100 men for you." Joshua kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I would fight the whole world." "I know." Margaret smiled through the tears that finally came. "But maybe we could avoid that if possible. I would like a quiet life for once." "Quiet sounds perfect." Joshua rested his forehead against hers. "After we get back to the station, after we make sure Luther and his men are truly gone, after I finish what I came to do." "What did you come to do?" Margaret asked. Joshua pulled back slightly, his dark eyes intense. "I came to ask you to marry me, to build a life with me. I know it will be hard. I know people will judge us. But I do not care about any of that. I only care about you, Margaret. I love you with everything I am." Margaret's heart felt like it might burst. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to all of it. Yes to marriage. Yes to a life together. Yes to facing whatever comes as long as we face it together." Joshua kissed her deeply, pouring all his love and relief into it. When they finally broke apart, both were smiling, despite the cold, despite their injuries, despite everything they had been through. "We should get back to the station," Margaret said reluctantly. "The soldiers will need care, and we need to send word to the fort about Luther." "Always the healer," Joshua said with fond amusement. "That is one of the many reasons I love you." They rode back slowly, conserving the horse's strength. The sun was setting by the time the medical station came into view, smoke rising from the chimney, indicating someone had already returned and lit the fire. Margaret tensed, reaching for the rifle. But Joshua shook his head. "The tracks are military," he said, studying the ground. "Official patrol, not raiders." They approached cautiously anyway, and found Lieutenant Harris from the fort sitting by the fire with 2 soldiers. He stood quickly when they entered. "Miss Monroe." "Thank God," Harris said. "We found signs of a struggle. We have been searching for you." "Raiders took me," Margaret explained. "Luther Carlyle and his deserters. Joshua rescued me." Harris looked at Joshua with new respect. "We have been hunting Carlyle for months." "Where is he now?" "About 2 days northwest, unconscious in the snow with 5 of his men," Joshua said. "If you ride fast, you can catch them before they scatter." Harris nodded to his soldiers, who immediately headed for their horses. "I will need both of you to come to the fort tomorrow to give statements. But for tonight, rest. You have earned it." After the soldiers left, Margaret and Joshua were finally alone. They cleaned each other's wounds, tended their injuries with the gentle care of 2 healers who understood the body's fragility. Then they sat by the fire, Margaret in Joshua's arms, both content to simply exist in each other's presence. "Tell me about the life you want," Margaret said softly. "The one we are going to build together." Joshua was quiet for a moment, his hand stroking her hair. "I want a small place, maybe near the station so you can continue healing. Land enough for a garden and some horses. A house we build with our own hands, where children's laughter fills the rooms." "Children?" Margaret looked up at him with a smile. "If you want them. If we are blessed with them." Joshua's expression grew tender. "I want to teach them both healing traditions, yours and mine. I want them to grow up knowing both sides of their heritage, proud of both." "I want that too," Margaret said, emotion making her voice thick. "I want to wake up every morning in your arms. I want to work beside you, healing people, helping our community. I want to grow old with you, Joshua Ashford." "Then that is what we will do." Joshua tilted her face up to kiss her gently. "Starting tomorrow, we will go to the fort, give our statements, and I will officially resign from scouting. Then we will find a preacher who will marry us despite what anyone says. Or we could find someone who will marry us because they believe in love," Margaret suggested. "I heard there is a circuit preacher who comes through these parts. Reverend Thompson. They say he married a Comanche woman himself, so he understands. Then we will find this Reverend Thompson." Joshua pulled her closer. "I want to do this right, Margaret. I want you to have the wedding you deserve, even if it is small." "I do not need elaborate," Margaret assured him. "I just need you. Everything else is just details." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn down to embers. Eventually, Margaret stirred. "I should check the supply inventory. Make sure Luther's men did not steal anything important." "Later," Joshua said, tightening his arms around her. "Right now, just stay here. Let me hold you. Let me feel grateful that you are alive and safe and mine." Margaret relaxed back against his chest, surrendering to the moment. They had survived the blizzard, survived Luther, survived everything the harsh winter and cruel men had thrown at them. They had earned this peace, this quiet joy. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," Joshua replied, his lips brushing her hair. "Always." The next morning, they rode to the fort together. The soldiers stared at the sight of them riding side by side, Margaret's hand occasionally brushing Joshua's as they talked quietly. Let them stare, Margaret thought. Let them judge. She had found something rare and precious, and she would not hide it or apologize for it. The debriefing took most of the day. Harris and the fort commander listened carefully to their account of Luther's capture. A patrol was already out hunting the deserters. By evening, word came back that Luther and his men had been captured and would face military justice. "You have done this territory a great service," the commander said, shaking Joshua's hand. "Those raiders have been terrorizing ranchers and travelers for months. We owe you both a debt of gratitude." "I am just glad it is over," Joshua said. He glanced at Margaret. "And I would like to submit my resignation from scouting. Effective immediately." The commander's eyebrows rose. "That is sudden. May I ask why?" "Personal reasons," Joshua said firmly. "I am done with that life. I want to settle down, build something permanent." The commander's gaze shifted to Margaret, understanding dawning. "I see. Well, you have certainly earned retirement. Your pay will be settled by the end of the week." As they left the commander's office, they nearly collided with a portly man in dusty traveling clothes carrying a worn Bible. The man looked up, and his weathered face broke into a smile. "Joshua Ashford, as I live and breathe," he said. "I heard you were in these parts." "Reverend Thompson," Joshua said with genuine warmth. "It is good to see you. And who is this lovely lady?" The Reverend's eyes twinkled as he looked at Margaret. "This is Margaret Monroe," Joshua said, taking her hand. "The woman I am going to marry, if you will perform the ceremony." Reverend Thompson's smile widened. "Nothing would give me greater pleasure. When were you thinking?" Margaret and Joshua looked at each other. "As soon as possible," Margaret said. "We have wasted enough time already." "Tomorrow morning, then," the Reverend said. "I am only passing through for 2 days. Come to the chapel at dawn, and we will make it official in the eyes of God and man." That night, Margaret stayed at the small boarding house near the fort, while Joshua camped with the other scouts one last time. They had agreed to spend their last night as unmarried people apart, making their wedding night all the more meaningful. Margaret lay awake in the narrow bed, her mind racing. Tomorrow, she would become Joshua's wife. They would face whatever came together. She had no illusions that it would be easy. Some people would refuse her services as a healer. Some would spit when they passed. But others would understand. Others would see what she saw when she looked at Joshua. A good man, a skilled healer, someone worthy of love and respect. And even if the whole world rejected them, they would have each other. That would be enough. Dawn came cold and clear. Margaret dressed carefully in her best dress, the burgundy wool she had cleaned and pressed. She arranged her hair as nicely as she could, and tucked a few winter wildflowers that grew near the boarding house into the updo. They were not much, but they made her feel like a bride. Joshua was waiting at the chapel, and Margaret's breath caught when she saw him. He had braided his hair with leather and beads, and he wore his finest buckskin shirt, the beadwork intricate and beautiful. He looked like a warrior and a healer, fierce and gentle at once. "You are beautiful," Joshua said as she approached, taking both her hands. "So are you," Margaret replied, meaning it with her whole heart. Reverend Thompson performed the ceremony with quiet dignity. There were no guests except Lieutenant Harris and his wife, who had come to stand as witnesses. The words were simple, but profound. binding them together before God. Do you, Joshua Ashford, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, as long as you both shall live? I do, Joshua said, his voice strong and sure. And do you, Margaret Monroe, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, as long as you both shall live? I do, Margaret said, tears of joy streaming down her face. Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. Joshua, you may kiss your bride. Joshua gathered Margaret into his arms and kissed her tenderly, and Margaret felt her whole world shift and settle into place. This was right. This was meant to be. This was home. After the ceremony, Lieutenant Harris surprised them with a small gift, a land grant for 20 acres adjacent to the medical station. The commander approved it, Harris explained. For your service in capturing Luther Carlyle, you have earned a place to build your future. Margaret and Joshua thanked him profusely, overwhelmed by the unexpected generosity. 20 acres was enough to build a home, plant a garden, raise horses. It was more than they had dared to hope for. They rode back to the medical station as husband and wife, the winter sun shining cold and bright. Someone had been there in their absence, stocking the station with fresh supplies and firewood. Margaret suspected it was Harris's wife, a kind gesture of support. That evening, they prepared a simple meal together, moving around the small space with comfortable ease. Margaret found herself smiling constantly, unable to contain her joy. Every time she looked at Joshua, every time their hands brushed or he smiled at her, her heart felt too full for her chest. "What are you thinking?" Joshua asked, catching her staring at him. "That I am married to you," Margaret said simply. "That after everything we have been through, we get to have this. Simple happiness. Ordinary joy." Joshua set down the pot he was stirring and crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. "There is nothing ordinary about loving you," he said. "Every moment with you is extraordinary." He kissed her deeply, and Margaret felt heat flood through her body. They were married now. There was nothing standing between them in the full expression of their love. Joshua seemed to sense her thoughts, because his kisses grew more intense, more demanding. His hands slid into her hair, dislodging the careful updo, and Margaret did not care. "Margaret," he breathed against her lips. "My wife, my love." "Joshua," she replied, her hand sliding under his buckskin shirt to feel the warm skin beneath. "Take me to bed, please." He lifted her easily, carrying her to the small bedroom she had been using. The door closed behind them, shutting out the world and leaving only the two of them, husband and wife, two souls finally joined. Morning light woke Margaret, streaming warm and golden through the window. She lay in Joshua's arms, his chest rising and falling steadily beneath her cheek. Her body ached in new and wonderful ways, and she felt more content than she had ever imagined possible. Joshua stirred, his arms tightening around her. "Good morning, Mrs. Ashford," he murmured, his voice rough with sleep. "Good morning, Mr. Ashford," Margaret replied, unable to stop smiling. They lay together in comfortable silence, neither wanting to break the spell of the moment. Outside, the world continued with all its prejudices and problems. But here, in this bed, in this room, in this small medical station that had become their sanctuary. They were safe. They were loved. They were home. Eventually, practical concerns intruded. Margaret had patients who might come seeking care. Joshua needed to start planning the construction of their house on the new land. But they took their time rising, stealing kisses and touches, both reluctant to let go of the intimacy of the morning. Over breakfast, they discussed their plans. Joshua would start clearing a site for their house, using the trees on their land for timber. Margaret would continue running the medical station, building her reputation as a skilled healer. Together, they would create something lasting. "People will talk," Margaret said, voicing the worry that lingered despite her happiness. "They will say terrible things about us. Let them." Joshua took her hand across the table. "We will prove them wrong by living well, by loving openly, by showing them that what we have is real and good. Some will never accept us, but others will come around. You will see." And Joshua was right. Over the following days, as word spread about their marriage, reactions were mixed. Some ranchers refused to bring their families to Margaret for care. The fort commander's wife pointedly ignored them at the general store. But others surprised them with kindness. Mrs. Patterson, the widow who ran the boarding house, brought them a quilt she had made. "My late husband was half Mexican," she confided. "I know what it is like to be judged for who you love. You have my support, for what it is worth." Old Doc Harrison, who had trained Margaret in advanced surgical techniques, stopped by the station. "Heard you married that Cheyenne scout," he said gruffly. "Good man from what I saw. You two make a fine pair of healers. This territory needs more people who care about saving lives instead of taking them." Slowly, steadily, they built their life. Joshua constructed a small cabin on their land, working from dawn to dusk while Margaret tended patients at the station. Neighbors who had initially been cold began to warm as they saw the quality of care the couple provided. A rancher's son, injured in a fall, recovered completely under their joint treatment. A difficult childbirth ended successfully because of Margaret's surgical skills and Joshua's calming herbs. Word spread of the healing team at the medical station. People began traveling from farther away, seeking their help. Margaret and Joshua worked side by side, their different approaches to medicine complementing each other perfectly. Western surgery combined with traditional Cheyenne remedies produced remarkable results. 3 weeks after their wedding, Margaret woke feeling ill. At first, she thought it was exhaustion from long hours working. But when the nausea persisted and her monthly cycle failed to arrive, realization dawned. She was pregnant. She told Joshua that evening, as they sat on the porch of their nearly finished cabin, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. "I am with child," she said simply. Joshua's expression transformed from surprise to pure joy. He pulled her close, his hand immediately going to her still flat stomach. "A baby," he breathed. "Margaret, we are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Margaret asked, though she could see the answer in his face. Happy does not begin to cover it. Joshua kissed her tenderly. Terrified, thrilled, grateful beyond words. A child, Margaret. Our child. They sat together as the sun set, making plans and dreaming of the future. Their child would grow up knowing both cultures, both healing traditions. They would teach them to be proud of their heritage, to stand strong against prejudice, to love without fear. What if people are cruel to our child? Margaret asked, voicing the fear that gnawed at her heart. Then we will teach them to be strong, Joshua said firmly. We will show them by example that love is worth fighting for, that their existence is not a mistake but a blessing. They will have challenges, yes, but they will also have us. Our love, our support. That will be enough. Spring came early that year, melting the last of the winter snow and bringing green life back to the prairie. The cabin was finished, a solid structure that would shelter them and their growing family. Margaret's pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Joshua hovered over her with endearing protectiveness. I am a nurse, Margaret reminded him when he tried to prevent her from carrying water. I know my own limits. You are my wife, carrying my child, Joshua countered. Let me take care of you. Margaret relented, because she loved seeing this tender side of him. The fierce warrior healer, who could track raiders across miles of wilderness, became gentle and careful when he touched her growing belly, talking to their unborn child in both English and Cheyenne, teaching them words and songs before they were even born. The community around them continued to evolve. Some people remained hostile, crossing the street to avoid them or refusing their services. But others embraced them, recognizing the value of having skilled healers who did not judge or discriminate. The medical station expanded, and Margaret trained 2 young women from nearby ranches in basic nursing care. Joshua taught traditional medicine to anyone willing to learn, sharing his knowledge freely. A local farmer's daughter showed particular aptitude, and Joshua took her on as an informal apprentice, teaching her which plants healed and which harmed, how to prepare remedies, when to trust medicine, and when to trust the body's own wisdom. One afternoon in late spring, a wagon arrived at the station carrying a woman in active labor. Her husband, a young rancher, looked terrified. She is early, he said, and something is wrong. Doc Harrison said to bring her here, that you are the best. Margaret immediately went into professional mode, assessing the situation while Joshua prepared supplies. The baby was breech, a dangerous position that could kill both mother and child if not handled correctly. Margaret had dealt with breech births before, but this would be delicate work. I need to turn the baby, Margaret explained to the frightened husband. It is risky, but leaving it breech is riskier. Joshua will give your wife something for the pain. Do you trust us? The young man looked at Joshua, at Margaret's pregnant belly, at their calm competence. Doc Harrison said, you saved his nephew's life when everyone else had given up. Yes, I trust you. For the next 4 hours, Margaret and Joshua worked in perfect synchronization. Joshua administered his pain remedies carefully, monitoring the mother's vital signs while Margaret manually turned the baby into the correct position. It was painstaking, exhausting work that required both strength and delicacy. Finally, blessedly, the baby turned. The mother pushed, and a healthy baby girl entered the world squalling with indignation. The young father wept with relief, and even Joshua's eyes were suspiciously bright. You saved them, the rancher said, gripping both their hands. I will never forget this. Neither will anyone else. I will make sure people know what you did. And he did. Word spread of the miraculous breech birth, of how the mixed couple healers at the station had saved both mother and child when it seemed hopeless. More patients came. More acceptance followed. It was not universal, would never be universal, but it was enough. Summer arrived in full force, bringing heat and the promise of harvest. Margaret's pregnancy advanced, her belly growing round and full. Joshua finished building an addition to the cabin, a room for the baby with a window facing east, so the morning sun would wake them gently. "You are nesting," Margaret teased him, watching as he carved a small wooden cradle with infinite care. "I am preparing for our child," Joshua corrected, but he was smiling. "I want everything to be perfect." "It already is perfect," Margaret said, resting her hand on her belly where their baby kicked actively. "We have a home, work we love, each other. What more could we need?" "Nothing," Joshua agreed, setting aside the cradle to pull her into his arms carefully, mindful of her pregnant belly. "We have everything." Late summer brought Margaret's labor, arriving in the middle of the night, as these things often do. Joshua had delivered many babies as part of his healing practice, but delivering his own child was different. His hands shook as he prepared supplies, and Margaret found herself reassuring him even through her contractions. "You can do this," she said, gripping his hand. "We can do this together." "I am terrified," Joshua admitted. "If something goes wrong, if I lose you or the baby—" "You will not lose us." Margaret pulled him close, kissing him fiercely. "I am strong, the baby is strong, and you are the best healer I know. We are going to be fine." The labor progressed through the night and into the dawn. It was hard work, painful and exhausting, but Margaret had delivered enough babies to know hers was progressing normally. Joshua stayed calm once the work began, his hands steady and sure as he coached her through each contraction. As the sun rose, painting their bedroom in gold and rose light, Margaret gave one final push, and their son entered the world. He was perfect, small but healthy, with his father's dark hair and his mother's delicate features. His cry was strong and indignant, announcing his arrival to the world. Joshua cut the cord with shaking hands, then wrapped their son carefully and placed him in Margaret's arms. Tears streamed down his face as he looked at his wife and newborn child. "He is perfect," Joshua whispered. "Margaret, we made a person, a perfect little person. What should we name him?" Margaret asked, studying their son's tiny face with wonder. Joshua thought for a moment. "Thomas," he said. "After my father, who taught me that love crosses all boundaries. And Blue Sky, my mother's name, for his Cheyenne heritage. Thomas Blue Sky Ashford." "Thomas Blue Sky Ashford," Margaret repeated, testing the name. "It is perfect. He is perfect. We are perfect." Joshua climbed carefully into bed beside them, wrapping his arms around both wife and child. They lay together as the sun rose higher. A family now. 3, where there had been 2. The weeks after Thomas's birth passed in a blur of feeding and diaper changing and sleepless nights. But Margaret had never been happier. Joshua was a devoted father, walking the floor with their son during fussy periods, singing Cheyenne lullabies in a soft voice, changing diapers without complaint. Mrs. Patterson visited, bringing more baby blankets and advice. "He is beautiful," she said, holding Thomas with experienced hands. "You two are going to be wonderful parents." Doc Harrison stopped by with a bag of medical supplies. "For the baby," he explained gruffly. "And I wanted to say, I am proud of both of you. You are proving every bigot in this territory wrong, just by living well and loving openly." Even Lieutenant Harris and his wife came with congratulations and a hand-carved rocking horse for when Thomas was older. "The fort commander wanted me to tell you that you have earned the respect of the military," Harris said. "Not everyone agrees with your marriage, but everyone respects the lives you have saved." The acceptance was not universal, would never be universal, but it was real, and it was growing. Margaret and Joshua had built something solid, something lasting, a home, a practice, a family. They had proven that love could overcome prejudice, that two people from different worlds could create something beautiful together. Thomas grew quickly, a happy baby who seemed to inherit the best qualities of both parents. He had Joshua's dark eyes and Margaret's gentle spirit, and already showed signs of being curious about the world around him. When patients came to the station, the baby would watch intently from his cradle, as if already learning the healing arts. Fall arrived, bringing cooler temperatures and the harvest season. Margaret and Joshua worked their garden together, preserving vegetables for the winter while Thomas slept in a basket nearby. The medical station continued to thrive, with a steady stream of patients seeking their combined expertise. One afternoon in early October, a familiar figure rode up to the cabin. It was Reverend Thompson, making his circuit through the territory. He dismounted with a broad smile, immediately coming to admire baby Thomas. "He is a fine boy," the Reverend said, bouncing Thomas gently. "Strong and healthy. You two should be proud." "We are," Margaret said, unable to keep the joy from her voice. "Every single day. I have been hearing stories about you both," Reverend Thompson continued, "about the lives you have saved, the way you have brought your two healing traditions together. People talk about the miracle workers at the medical station. You are changing minds, one patient at a time." "We are just doing what we love," Joshua said, his arm around Margaret's waist. "Healing people, building our life together. That is exactly what God intended," the Reverend said warmly. "Love and purpose, combined with skill and dedication. You two are a testament to what is possible when people look past their prejudices." Before he left, Reverend Thompson blessed their home and their family, asking God to continue protecting them and their work. Standing on the porch watching him ride away, Margaret leaned into Joshua's embrace. Thomas nestled between them. "We have come so far," she said softly. "From that first day in the blizzard, when I did not even know if I could trust you. And now?" Joshua asked, kissing the top of her head. "Now you are my whole world," Margaret replied. "You and Thomas. You are everything." Winter approached again, bringing memories of that terrible blizzard that had first trapped them together. But this winter would be different. Their cabin was solid and warm, their pantry well-stocked, their family safe and together. They had weathered the storms, both literal and figurative, and emerged stronger. One evening in late November, as the first snow began to fall, Margaret stood at the window, watching the flakes drift down. Joshua came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "I am thinking about how much has changed since last winter," Margaret said. "How lost and alone I felt before you came into my life. How I thought my chance at happiness had passed. And now I know that it is never too late," Margaret said, turning in his arms to face him. "That love can find you even in the darkest winter. That two broken people can heal each other and create something beautiful." Joshua kissed her tenderly, You healed me, Margaret. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose beyond just surviving. You showed me that I could belong somewhere, that I did not have to choose between my two heritages. I could be both, and that could be enough. You showed me the same thing, Margaret replied, that my past did not define my future, that I could love again without fear, that I was worthy of happiness. They stood together at the window, watching the snow fall peacefully, so different from that violent blizzard that had brought them together. Thomas slept in his cradle nearby, making the soft baby sounds that never failed to make them smile. I have been thinking, Joshua said after a comfortable silence, about expanding the medical station, adding another room so we can handle more patients, maybe training more apprentices in both our traditions. I would like that, Margaret agreed. And I have been thinking about writing down what we have learned, about combining Western medicine with traditional healing, so others can learn from what we have discovered. A book? Joshua looked surprised and pleased. That is a wonderful idea. We could help healers everywhere, show them that different traditions can work together. They talked late into the night, making plans and dreaming of the future. More patients to help, more knowledge to share, more children perhaps, if they were blessed. Their life was not perfect. There were still people who refused their services, who crossed the street to avoid them, who muttered slurs when they thought Margaret and Joshua could not hear. But those voices grew quieter every day, drowned out by the gratitude of patients they had saved, by the respect they had earned through competence and compassion. Christmas came, and with it an unexpected gift. The fort commander himself rode out to their cabin, accompanied by several officers. Margaret and Joshua exchanged worried glances, wondering what official business could bring such an entourage. But the commander was smiling. "I come bearing good news," he said, dismounting. "The territorial governor has heard about your work here, about the lives you have saved, and the healing methods you have pioneered. He wants to officially recognize your contributions to the territory." He handed Joshua an official-looking document. "This grants you permanent medical licensing for the territory of Texas, recognizing both your traditional Cheyenne healing practices and your work as a certified medical practitioner. You are the first person of Native heritage to receive such recognition." Joshua stared at the document, emotion overwhelming him. Margaret saw tears in his eyes and squeezed his hand tightly. "And Miss Monroe, or rather Mrs. Ashford," the commander continued, handing Margaret another document. "You are being officially appointed as the territorial medical officer for this district. Your work has saved countless lives, and the territory wants to ensure you can continue doing so with full authority and resources." Margaret could barely speak. "Thank you," she managed. "This means more than you know." "You have earned it," the commander said simply. "Both of you have proven that skill and dedication matter more than heritage or prejudice. You have made this territory better, safer, healthier. That deserves recognition." After the officers left, Margaret and Joshua stood in their cabin, holding their official documents and each other. Thomas played on a blanket nearby, blissfully unaware of the significance of the moment. "We did it," Margaret whispered. "We really did it." "We did it together," Joshua corrected. "Every step, every challenge, every victory. Together." They celebrated quietly that evening, just the three of them by the fire. Joshua sang traditional Cheyenne songs to Thomas while Margaret prepared their meal. The baby laughed and clapped his hands, delighted by his father's voice. It was a perfect moment, simple and profound. As winter deepened, their work continued. More patients came, drawn by their growing reputation. Young healers arrived asking to apprentice, eager to learn the combination of techniques that made Margaret and Joshua so effective. The medical station expanded, adding that second room Joshua had envisioned, and the sound of learning and healing filled the space. One snowy afternoon, an elderly Cheyenne woman arrived at the station, her grandson helping her from their horse. She spoke no English, only Cheyenne, and looked warily at Margaret. But when Joshua greeted her in their shared language, her expression softened. They spoke for several minutes, Joshua translating for Margaret. The woman had a persistent cough and chest pain. Margaret examined her carefully, while Joshua explained each step in Cheyenne, keeping the woman calm and comfortable. Together, they determined she had pneumonia and would need both Western medicine and traditional remedies to recover. Joshua prepared a mixture of herbs while Margaret administered medication. The woman stayed at the station for 3 days, recovering under their joint care. When she left, fully healed, she took Joshua's hands and spoke at length in Cheyenne. He nodded, his eyes glistening. "What did she say?" Margaret asked after the woman left. "She said that I walk in 2 worlds with honor," Joshua replied, his voice thick with emotion. "That my mother would be proud of the healer I have become and the family I have built." She said that bringing together 2 healing traditions shows wisdom and strength, not weakness or betrayal. Margaret hugged him tightly. "She is right. Your mother would be proud. I am proud of you every single day." "And I am proud of us," Joshua said, pulling back to look into her eyes. "Of what we have built, of how we have faced every challenge together. We have proven that love is stronger than hate, that partnership is stronger than prejudice." Spring arrived early, bringing warmth and new growth. Thomas took his first steps in the garden, stumbling between his parents while they laughed and encouraged him. The medical station flourished, and their reputation spread even further. Patients traveled from neighboring territories specifically to seek their care. Margaret's book on combined healing practices was progressing slowly but steadily, written in the evenings after Thomas was asleep. Joshua contributed chapters on traditional Cheyenne medicine, carefully explaining the spiritual and practical aspects that made the remedies effective. They hoped to publish it within the year, making their knowledge available to healers everywhere. One warm afternoon in early May, as Margaret worked in the garden with Thomas playing nearby, she heard horses approaching. Looking up, she saw a group of Cheyenne riders, their faces painted and dressed in traditional clothing. Her heart lurched with brief fear. But then she recognized the lead rider. It was the elderly woman they had treated, along with several younger warriors. Joshua emerged from the cabin, and his expression transformed when he saw them. He spoke in rapid Cheyenne, and the conversation flowed back and forth for several minutes. Finally, the elderly woman dismounted and approached Margaret directly. Through Joshua's translation, she explained that word of his healing work had reached the Cheyenne elders. They wanted to officially recognize him as a healer in the traditional way, to restore the honor that had been lost when he had worked as a scout. They wanted to welcome him back into the tribe, along with his white wife and mixed heritage son, if they wished to accept. Margaret looked at Joshua, seeing the longing and joy and trepidation in his eyes. "What do you want?" she asked softly. "I want both worlds," Joshua said. "I want to be Cheyenne and American, to honor my mother and my father, to walk between cultures with you beside me. Is that asking too much?" No, Margaret said firmly. It is asking for exactly what you deserve. What we all deserve. To be whole, complete, accepted. Joshua turned to the elderly woman and spoke in Cheyenne. She smiled, a brilliant expression of joy, and gestured to the other riders. They dismounted and began a ceremony right there in the garden, singing traditional songs and speaking blessings over Joshua, Margaret, and Thomas. Margaret did not understand the words, but she understood the meaning. Acceptance. Belonging. Family. The riders gave them gifts, beautifully beaded clothing, a traditional cradle board for Thomas, herbs and medicines from Cheyenne lands. They stayed for a meal, sharing food and stories, bridging two worlds just as Joshua and Margaret had been doing all along. As the sun set and the Cheyenne riders prepared to leave, the elderly woman embraced Margaret as if she were family. No words were needed. The gesture said everything. You are one of us now. You are welcome. You belong. After they left, Margaret and Joshua stood in their garden, holding Thomas between them, watching the riders disappear into the golden sunset. The baby babbled happily, reaching for the beaded necklace the woman had placed around his mother's neck. "We have come full circle," Joshua said softly. "From the blizzard that brought us together, through all the struggles and victories, to this moment. We have built something that will last, Margaret. Not just for us, but for Thomas, for future generations. We have proven that love can bridge any divide. And we will keep proving it," Margaret replied, standing on tiptoe to kiss him. "Every single day, for the rest of our lives." They went inside as darkness fell, lighting the lamps and settling into their evening routine. Thomas needed feeding and rocking to sleep. There were medical notes to write, supplies to organize, plans to make for the next day's patients. It was ordinary, domestic, perfectly imperfect. But as Margaret sat in the rocking chair nursing their son, while Joshua worked on the book by lamplight, she felt a profound sense of contentment wash over her. This was the life she had thought was impossible. This was the happiness she had believed she did not deserve. She thought back to that first day in the blizzard, when Joshua had walked through the door covered in snow, when she had made the choice to trust him despite her fear. If she could go back and tell that frightened, lonely version of herself what the future held, would she believe it? Would she believe that the Cheyenne scout would become her husband, her partner, the father of her child? Would she believe that together they would build something so beautiful, so strong, so lasting? "What are you smiling about?" Joshua asked, looking up from his writing. "Everything," Margaret said simply. "Absolutely everything." He came over and kissed her forehead, then gently touched Thomas's sleeping face. "I love you," he said. "Both of you, more than I have words to express." "I love you too," Margaret replied. "Always and forever." Outside, the prairie stretched endlessly under a canopy of stars. Inside their cabin, warmth and love and family filled every corner. They had survived the blizzard, defeated their enemies, overcome prejudice, and built a life worth living. Together, they had healed not just patients, but each other's wounded hearts. And in the morning, they would wake and do it all again. Heal the sick, tend their garden, raise their son, love each other fiercely. It was ordinary magic, the kind that came from commitment and partnership, and choosing each other every single day. The fire crackled softly. Thomas's breathing was peaceful and even. Joshua returned to his writing, while Margaret finished nursing their son and prepared to put him in his cradle. It was a moment like 1,000 others they had shared and would share in the years to come. But it was also perfect. Completely, absolutely perfect. Because they were together, and they were home, and love had proven stronger than every storm that had tried to tear them apart. Margaret laid Thomas in his cradle and covered him with the soft blanket Mrs. Patterson had made. She stood there for a moment, watching him sleep, marveling at the miracle of him. Then she went to Joshua, resting her hands on his shoulders as he wrote. "Come to bed," she said softly. "The book can wait. I want to fall asleep in your arms." Joshua set down his pen immediately, turning to pull her close. "Always," he said. "Every night for the rest of our lives." They extinguished the lamps and climbed into bed, curling together under warm quilts. Through the window, stars glittered cold and brilliant. But inside, wrapped in each other's arms, they were warm and safe and deeply, profoundly happy. "Thank you," Margaret whispered into the darkness. "For what?" Joshua asked, his breath warm against her hair. "For walking through that door in the blizzard. For staying. For loving me. For building this life with me." "Thank you for taking the risk," Joshua replied. "For opening your door and your heart to a stranger. For seeing me, not just what I was or where I came from, but who I could be. Who we could be together." They fell asleep that way, holding each other close, their son sleeping peacefully nearby, their home solid and warm around them. Outside, the prairie sang its ancient song under the stars, and inside, love kept watch through the night. This was their happily ever after. Not perfect, never easy, but earned through courage and commitment and choosing each other again and again. They had survived the killing cold of winter and emerged into spring together. They had faced prejudice and violence and uncertainty, and they had won. Because love, real love, the kind that healed and sustained and endured, was always worth fighting for. And Margaret and Joshua would keep fighting, keep healing, keep loving, for all the days of their lives. Together, always together.